Welcome, everyone. We're going to allow a few moments for others to join us, and we'll begin in about 2 minutes. Good evening. My name is Heather Belgian with the YSU Office of Alumni and Events. Welcome to the Alumni Lecture Series program, Do's and Don'ts of Nonprofit Leadership with Karen Conklin. Karen is a 1970 graduate of the Williamson College of Business Administration. Throughout her long career in the nonprofit sector, Karen has led many organizations. She's touched the lives of children and animals and had an impact in the arts and the American Red Cross. She's been the CEO of Conklin Consulting, LLC for 20 years, where she helps nonprofits with fund development, board development, and strategic planning. Karen is also a guest lecturer in the YSU Center for Nonprofit Leadership. As you have questions this evening, feel free to type those in the Facebook comments or the WebEx chat, depending on where you're viewing the lecture. Karen will answer questions after about 30 minutes of lecture time. If your question doesn't get answered this evening, her contact information will appear in the Facebook comments at the end of this video, and she'll be happy to reach out to you at a later time. Karen, thank you so much for your willingness to discuss pathways to board involvement and best practices for current board members. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and good evening, and welcome to the Do's and Don'ts of Nonprofit Boards. Welcome to my home office and sometimes guest room. Tonight I wanted to share the do's and don'ts with you about what makes a good nonprofit board. First of all, good, strong boards are essential to the survival of any nonprofit. There is, I believe, though, a secret sauce to getting a board of directors that can and does move your organization forward. Next, membership on a board of directors is a great stepping stone for a career. So how do you get on a board of directors? So we're going to touch on that a little bit. And then finally, now that you're on a board, what are your obligations? So we're going to chat about that. But those are some of the thoughts that I want to share with you tonight. First of all, I want to tell you, when I got out of YSU, I was working for a nonprofit, my very first nonprofit, and I was asked to give a presentation to the board of directors. I was terrified. Not only did I have to give a presentation, but I also had to answer questions. And these were people of power and influence, and I had to face them. Guess what? From the outside, what I thought was power was really passion. And there's a difference. You and the organization deserve members that have that passion and believe in your mission. And this is the first and foremost criteria for serving on a board of directors. So I have a question for you. I'm actually going to give you $1 million. So I'm going to give you, if you had $1 million, who are you going to give it to? You have to give it to a nonprofit. Think about that. We're going to come back to that. Right now, I want to talk about the secret sauce. So there are about 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States. There are over 100,000 just in Ohio. And in the Mahoning Valley, there are almost 5,000 nonprofits. And prior to the virus, the nonprofits were growing at a rate of about 10% a year. That means there's a lot of competition for both board members and dollars. So in my opinion, the secret sauce for any organization to survive and thrive is the board nominating committee. So if you have one and aren't using it, you're making a grave mistake. And if you don't have one, you really need to get one. This is the committee that has your organization's destiny in their hands. So where does your organization want to be in 2 or 5 years? What skill sets do you need to get there? If you're a new organization, who did you put on your list as your board of directors when you were applying to the state of Ohio to become a 501c3? Many times new nonprofits look around and they add family and friends to this. without really thinking that the function of a board is to move your organization forward. So do those names on that piece of paper really believe in your mission? Good boards have a plan. If your plan is to purchase a building down the road, you might want to have a realtor on your board, but you also need to realize that realtor can't facilitate that sale. That's a conflict of interest. And good boards have all of their board members sign a conflict of interest document. So what other skill sets do you need to build your board? What projects do you have coming up? Legal, finance, construction, architects, all of the skill sets that you really should be thinking about. How many people are you going to have on your board? Again, this has to be a manageable number. It also depends on the size of the footprint that you serve, so that you should have representation. Remember, if you have 40 board members and only half of them show up, are you going to be able to meet quorum at your board meeting to even be able to conduct board business? So think about that when you're deciding how many. Normal boards today, the average is like 15 to 20, 25. Diversity. Your board needs to be diverse. It needs to represent the community you serve and the community we live in. It's not just, I'm not talking just about race. I'm talking about age, gender, national origin. And again, if you look out at your board of directors, do they understand and embrace the mission of your organization? So you also have to be strategic about building a board of influence and affluence. No matter how wonderful your mission is, you cannot meet your mission without money. So are you building that board of influence and affluence? How do you find these people? So a good nominating committee will take all of the list of the skill sets and needs assessment that the board says they need, and then they start doing their homework. So how do they do that? So one way is they ask all the other board members, who do you know that might have this skill set? Or then the nominating committee chair will say, well, will you go back to your place of work and start spreading the word that our organization is looking for board members? One of the greatest resources for me over time was Chamber of Commerce Directory. I read that document every year for a lot of years, cover to cover, because it was almost magical. You would find that company and was like, wow, we're doing that and they do this, and maybe that's a perfect marriage. I also kept a list of names from the newspapers. I was reading 5 papers a day, serving all of the footprints, that were within the structure. And I would look for people whose names were in the paper, who did something great, who got a promotion, and I would always keep that list. So another resource. My favorite way to recruit board members, I called every Valley CEO once a year. And my pitch was, I know that you're really, really busy, and probably you don't have the time to serve on the board. If you do, that's wonderful. Let's have that conversation. If you don't, what up and coming employees are in your organization that might serve our organization well, but it would be an amazing career development tool for them? Please get back to me, or have somebody get back to me within a week, and with that list of names. I loved it because as the years went by, I never had to call them. They would call me. And guess what? The other part of the pitch was, by the way, don't forget, we're having a fundraiser and you're going to get my ask letter in the mail. So it was also a donor touch. Once the board and myself had gathered all of the names, the nominating committee sets a meeting, and it was usually someplace in the morning, 10 o'clock, someplace convenient for everybody. Never want to meet with more than 3 potential candidates at a time. At that meeting, you want to hear from the candidates. Why did you show up? Why do you want to be on this board? What are your interests? Have you ever had a relationship or a family member that received services? And then it's your turn, and you want to talk about a great story about your organization. You want them to know the heart and soul of the work that you do. Then you need to be honest about the time commitment. Every potential board member needs to know, and we're all really, really busy people. So for instance, if one of the candidates says, well, I have a Rotary meeting on Thursday and that's the same time your board meets, Don't let that go and just, okay, you can't be on the board. The messaging needs to be, would you please go back to your place of employment and think of anybody else that's not in Rotary that might want to join? Board candidates also have the right to know what the financial obligation is to your organization. So I am a firm believer that every board member has to make a financial contribution. I never cared what it was. All I needed to know was that they had a commitment, so that when I was writing a grant request, I was able, or speaking with a funder, and that question came up, does 100% of your board make a financial contribution? Excuse me, I was always able to say yes. Now, some large $500, some are $1,000. I've never been a fan of that strategy, just to be clear, but it is critical, I believe, that every board member has some financial skin in the game. Good boards also establish a list of what counts as a board gift. So it's not just that check you write, it is also that maybe buying a table at a special event, or a donor match from the employer. Every organization is different, but every board needs to create that list. It makes it easier when you're trying to evaluate, the board performance. Candidates are also told that they're expected not only to attend board meetings, but first and foremost, a board orientation. They really need to hear from the board chair and the director one-to-one, and get their questions answered. At the end of this nominating committee, the chair will ask if the candidates are interested. Those that are will get a profile in the mail or a phone call from the board chair or the nominating committee chair. And then the other members stay, the nominating committee members stay, and they discuss the candidates, and from there decide who they want to move forward. The reason I like this process is because it's one meeting, so you don't have to convene everybody at another time. So board members are the outward face of your organization. By using your nominating committee, you're guaranteed to build a board that meets not only your current needs, but also your future needs. Okay, so you've been thinking about where you want to spend the $1 million I gave you? So what if I said you could pick two organizations? Two organizations. Where would you give money? Okay. Now we're going to talk about how you get on a board of directors. So first of all, every board needs the 4 W's, and I stole this from the Nonprofit Management for Pet Rescue Organizations. And I've used this over the years. Every board needs wisdom to further the mission, workers who are willing to commit time, talent, and energy and actively participate, wealth to make a personal contribution to the financial well-being, and the worrier. My favorite is the worrier. Worrier, this is a person who provides those reality checks to the rest of the board. And every board needs a person who asks the hard question. Those are the folks that really separate a good board from a yes board. So I'm going to get back to that in a little bit. I've been honored, as Heather said, to speak to the nonprofit leadership class over the years. And when I go into those classes, I always say, okay, how many of you want to start your own nonprofit someday? And half the class raises their hands. So if that's a goal of yours, then, is that where you're going to give the $1 million that I just gave you? If the answer is yes, does it match up with that $1 million you have to give away? As you think about where you're giving this generous donation, what charities did you pick? If you pick the nonprofit, if you picked your nonprofit someday, remember, competition in the nonprofit world is both real for great board members and for dollars. So if there's an existing organization that meets your need, that's where you want to start. Being a good volunteer for a cause you believe in is a great pathway to being on a board someday. But it only works if you tell someone. If a cure for cancer is near and dear to your heart, and you already volunteer for Relay for Life, seek out the director or board members and have that conversation. Follow it up with a note to the director or the board chair, and remind them that you're really passionate about their organization. Be prepared to share the skills that you have that can bring value to their board of directors. And you might also ask, do you have any committees that, that have non-board members on them? Many great organizations, that's a stepping stone to be on the board. Ask at your place of work. Do the things that you're passionate about in any way align with what your employee is giving to? Check that out. Again, that's a win-win for you and the corporation. Do not be afraid to call the organization CEO or director. Tout your stuff. Tell them you love what they're doing and you would like to know what their pathway is to be on their board of directors. What skill sets are they looking for? The directors I know would be more than happy to have that conversation. And most of our directors in this valley are really smart. So they're going to answer your question on board recruitment, and then they're going to tell you about other volunteer opportunities that they have in their organization. Check out the organization you're interested in. Check out their webpage. Most nonprofits post their board list on their webpage. An opportunity, you may already know somebody that you can have a conversation. But volunteer. By the way, did you know there's actually a number for a value of 1 hour of volunteer time? It's actually around $25. So every hour that you spend helping your community in a volunteer capacity, that's $25 that organization does not have to spend. There are also a couple of things that you should ask before you agree to be on a board of directors. And for that matter, taking a job in a nonprofit. Number one question, is your organization financially secure? And if you need to, ask to see a recent financial report or an audit. Second, does the organization carry directors and officers liability insurance? And if they say they don't even know what that is, that should be a red flag. D&O insurance is the insurance that protects board members and staff members if something goes sideways. May I visit your office? That's another question to ask. And if you make that visit and you were uncomfortable with, maybe there's some red flags there, that's probably not the organization for you. So I spoke earlier about the 4 W's, and I want to go back to why being the worrier is one of my favorite kinds of board members. And I'm going to share a story. Years ago, I worked for a humane society. And I did it because I knew my daughter died when she was 12. And I knew Alexis loved animals. So I knew at some point in time I was going to do something in her honor. So I was asked to come in this beautiful office building, and I met with the search committee, and they offered me the job, and I had gone out and looked at the facility. And it was an old barn with a building attached to it. And the long-term plan was to raise $7 million to move them to a new shelter. And ultimately, that is what we were able to do. But my first week on the job, I had a phone call because nobody ever came to the shelter. Most of the board members just came to the board meetings. So I get there the first day and they tell me, Karen, don't forget, first thing you have to do is if you need to copy something, you need to bang on the copy machine. And I'm like, why do I have to bang on the copy machine? Well, so the mice will leave. I'm like, okay. And also be careful because there'll be mice that will run over your feet and across your desk while you're working. And I thought they were kidding, but they weren't. So the worrier knew this, the worrier had clued me in, and I was able to use the worrier to go back to the board and say, we have a rodent problem in this facility. And it's really, really bad. And we took some corrective action. I call it my mouse mutiny. And the very first week, we removed 30,000 mice. Yes. Now, the end result of that is if I get a mouse in my house, it's my problem because I'm the mouse expert. But worriers can bring to attention things that you need to know. And then my second month of retirement at the American Red Cross, I want to talk to you about how important volunteers are. And in the Red Cross, For our 5 counties, which was Ashtabula all the way down to Steubenville, there were 3 staff, myself, 1 disaster person, and 1 administrative person. That's people for 5 counties. All of the work, 95% of the work was done and still is done by amazing volunteers. So never underestimate the value of your volunteer time. So now you've accepted a position on a board and you're excited and you're ready to start. So how can you be the board member that really makes a difference? Let's start with the duties of a board member. You will provide continuity for the organization. You select and appoint the executive director or CEO, whatever you're going to call them, and you must do an annual performance review for that director. Organizations that don't annually judge the performance of their leadership get into trouble. You're going to govern the organization by broad policies and objectives, not by micromanaging. The board has only one employee, and that is the director. Every other employee report to that director. Employees' personnel policies are in place to handle any grievances, and most organizations have a personnel committee as part of their board. Your responsibility is to help ensure that the board acquires sufficient resources so that you can continue operations. You're accountable for the public work that's done, and you're also accountable for the public image. So that means, being positive and excited about your representation of that organization. So just like the board does an annual performance evaluation on your leadership, your executive director, every board should also do an annual board assessment on the board's work. Have you met your goals and objectives? And some of the questions on those are, as a board member, have I attended board meetings? Have I participated? So you're responsible for your own assessment as well. Most organizations ask you as a board member to sign a code of ethics. And there are lots of variations. I happen to really like this one. As a board member, I believe in the purpose and mission of this organization, and I will act responsibly and prudently as its steward. As a board member, I will respect and support the majority decisions of the board. I will recognize that all authority is vested in the full board only when it meets in legal session. I will stay informed about what's going on. I'll ask questions, I'll request information, and I will take responsibility for making informed, educated decisions. I will bring to the board any issues that I believe will have an adverse effect on the organization, its members, and those we serve. That's your warrior piece. I'll refer complaints to the proper level on the organizational chart. I will recognize that my job is to ensure that the organization is well managed, not to manage the organization. I'm going to repeat that. Your job is to ensure that the organization is well managed, not to manage the organization. To that end, I will work with the staff and other board members as partners to achieve our goals. I will consider myself a trustee of the organization and do my best to ensure that it is well maintained, financially secure, growing and operating in the best interest of those we serve. And I will always act in the best interest of the organization. I will excuse myself from discussions and votes where I have a conflict of interest, and I will attend at least 75% of board and committee meetings. Now, you also have a responsibility that says, as a part of my responsibility as a board member, I will not criticize fellow board members or their opinion outside of board meeting. I will not discuss board business outside of the meeting. Board business is confidential. I will not use the organization for my personal interest or that of my friends. I will promise I will not vote on any issue. I won't make up my mind ahead of time until I am in the meeting and listen to all sides and all the facts that have been presented. I will not interfere with the duties of the executive director or undermine his or her authority with staff members. Good organizations have every board member sign some type of ethics agreement. You have this responsibility as a board member, and you have an issue, you can, there's always a course of action. It's usually going to the executive committee or going to the board chair. In today's fragile environment, more than ever, organizations are charting a new course for future survival. I choose to see this as a wonderful opportunity to better the community in many new ways. I mean, who knew we'd be doing something like this? I'll be happy to take questions, but I'd like to conclude by sharing with you what I have told my children. If on a Sunday night you hate the thought of going to work on Monday, you are in the wrong job. Quit and find your passion. If you are on a board of directors and you are not enjoying the experience and you're not feeling that sense of making a difference, resign. Do not wait till your term is up. Resign. Find another organization where you can truly feel the passion that we all have working in the nonprofit sector. Thank you for listening. I feel so blessed to have served many causes, met many, many wonderful people, and I've never had a Sunday night where I didn't want to go to work the next day. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Feel free to share your questions in the Facebook comments, and we'll start with the couple here. Karen, as a board member, do you have any advice for how to handle a difficult fellow board member?
Well, I think that honesty, transparency is always the best way. Just like every societal piece, boards sometimes end up in cliques. And you really need to, it's up to the board chair to address any of those issues, have an open conversation. Sometimes it's just a misunderstanding. We all know communication can be tough, and it's even tougher in an organization where one board member is passionate about going left and everybody else wants to go right.
Okay. And with many nonprofits in the area, do you have any advice for collaboration between organizations?
I think United Way is a really good place to start. And I think the Youngstown Foundation, the Community Foundation, the Wien Foundation, they are the folks that really have their fingers on what's going on across the community. And so I think those organizations are great places for collaboration.
Great. Well, Karen, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us this evening. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you have questions, you can reach out to Karen. Her email address will be in the Facebook comments shortly. And also, don't forget to join us right here on Facebook and WebEx next Thursday, May 21st at 7 p.m. when Dr. Nicole Pettit will present Refugees, Myths and Realities. Thank you for joining us. Good night.